Let's look at the top 5 graded off Atlanta Falcons here in this game. Now 2-0 against the Buccaneers this season since they won the Thursday Night Football game in Week 5 and won again this weekend. Safety Jesse Bates at the top of the list with a 90.9. Running back Bijan Robinson with an 89.5. Tight end Kyle Pitts, National Tight End Day, 86.8. Offensive guard Chris Lidstrom with an 86.2. Offensive tackle Jake Matthews with an 83.7. Then quarterback Kirk Cousins, an elite 90.9 grade in this one. On Tampa Bay side of things, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, obviously. Wide receiver Raheem Jarrett steps up here with a 90.8. Didn't play a ton of snaps, but was able to play well when he was out there. Bucky Irving, not a 97.5. That's my bad. I typed that in wrong. Should be an 87.5, just for everybody out there who's watching on YouTube. Tight end Cade Otton with a 77.2. Cornerback Josh Hayes with a 75.3. And then offensive tackle Luke Gedeke with a 72.4. Baker Mayfield in this game, a 70.2. overall grade. Your stat that told the story here, Dalton. What do we got?
This game felt like a little bit of deja vu, didn't it? From that Thursday night game that you talked about.
Oh, just the Thursday night?
Just
that one?
Well, here we go.
I thought it was also the Ravens game.
Here we're going to get into that. So the first 4 weeks of this season, the Bucs had the second best coverage grade in the NFL. Okay. The last 4 weeks that we've seen, they have the second worst coverage grade in the NFL. And I know Servassier Dennis at linebacker, who's their usual cover linebacker, has been hurt, and that's made an impact in the middle of the field. But I don't think that's the type of injury that should crash your whole defense, right? And it just seems like teams right now are unafraid of throwing into the Bucs secondary. The one guy still playing well is Zion McCollum, but this really felt like on the Bucs defense almost a replay of what we saw in Atlanta when Kirk Cousins, he stood back there clean and tore him up. They didn't get a whole lot of pressure on him, and he made just all the right throws, especially over the middle of the field. You saw the linebackers struggle again. Antoine Winfield struggled in this game. Really, everybody for the Bucs in coverage. It looked exactly the same to me as it did 3 weeks ago.
Bowles is asked after the game, like, hey, what's going on with the defense? And Bowles basically said, he's like, we're not doing anything differently. He's like, they're not running it right. Somebody's not in the right spot. Somebody's, not passing something off correctly. Somebody's not where they need to be in the zone, whatever it is. Because the Bucs, they blitz more than any other team in the NFL. So when you're allocating resources towards attacking the pocket, you've obviously got to be on your P's and Q's really well in zone coverage. And very clearly over the last couple of weeks, the group that is out there is not doing that very well. They've got issues with the linebacker level, which I know we're going to dig into a little bit more. But since week 5, so including week 5, so I guess I should say since week 4, because I'm including that Thursday Night Football game. Bottom 5 in the NFL in total EPA per play allowed. 4th in EPA per pass allowed specifically. Second worst coverage grade in the league, like you pointed out. It's just, it's not good, and it's unfortunately not unfamiliar of Todd Bowles' defense. And sometimes I try to pump the brakes a little bit here, knowing that defense just overall is always going to be more up and down than offense.
For this one especially, though. With a Todd Bowles defense that blitzes at such a high rate, it's a high variance defense, but almost by design.
Right, and that's why when it is then high variance, I can't say that, and then when it is exactly what we say, get mad about it. Like, oh, how is this possible? And obviously you don't want to accept failure. You want to be better, but this is sort of the nature of Todd Bowles' defenses. And right now you're just going through a lull. Now, this team will have to, at the end of the season, I think, come to a conclusion on whether or not they want to keep living with that. Because I think that there was a discussion of Todd Bowles potentially not being the head coach going into this season. And if it continues to be up and down to the point where maybe they don't win the division this year, do you end up moving on? Do you want something that's a little bit more stable, a little less blitz heavy, something that's a little bit more reliable on the defense side of the ball? And that might be an oxymoron to say because, like I said, defense is very cyclical. But the stat that told the story is the Bucs are just straight up going through a very low point with their Todd Bowles defense. And they don't have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to make up for it. I thought that Baker Mayfield was good in this one, but it absolutely was not enough. I agree with you. I'm looking at your most disappointing, though. Bucs linebackers specifically are really struggling as a group to make that any better, or at least like raise the floor at all whatsoever.
Yeah, they're late. You mentioned the zone coverage. They're late to a lot of things right now. KJ Britt, look, the idea was he's the early down guy, and Servassier Dennis was the third down guy who came in for him for coverage. KJ Britt now being forced to be in on coverage downs. It's been rough because he's not really a space sort of playmaker. He makes all his good plays between the tackles in the run game. Levante David's struggling. I mean, you can't rely on him forever, can you? He's not quite as ageless as Tom Brady on that side. I know we think he should be a Hall of Famer, but look, the linebackers combined to allow 9 catches for 106 yards and a touchdown. It was similar numbers, if not higher than that, in the first time around against Atlanta. The Falcons were very clear in both of these games against the Bucs. Attack the middle of the field, attack these linebackers, make them run in the curl flat area outside. It's an issue right now throughout the entire defense in coverage, but the linebackers especially just not getting where they need to be in coverage, and I think you're going to see more teams attacking that until they start playing better.
Brett Coleman, fan of the show, is in the chat and just DM'd me and said, Bucs actually only blitzed Kirk Cousins on 7 of his 32 dropbacks yesterday.
And the problem with that is they can't, with a guy like Cousins, the Bucs can't get home with 4.
Well,
they don't have. The so if they only send 4 and you let Cousins. So last time in the first game, they did blitz him a good amount. They got a good amount of pressure, and Cousins was just good through that pressure. Okay, he beat you. This time they sent nothing, and they got no pressure, and Cousins stood back there clean all day, and it was essentially the same result.
I looked this up because I thought that was going to be my stat that told the story, how little and ineffective they are when just rushing with 4. It's not as bad as you would think. Like, I thought they were going to be basically bottom 5 in the NFL at pass rush win percentage, pass rush grade, total pressures yielded with just rushing 4 players. They're like 20th in basically all of those numbers, so it's not terrible.
They don't have that guy, though.
No, especially on the edges, they don't. And again, like, it's something where it's not horrendous, but it is not difference-making the way that you need it to be. And I think too often they are blitzing not just out of it's what Todd Bowles likes to do, because we've seen that throughout his career, but also a little bit out of necessity because they don't have those players, especially on the edge, that are one-on-one winners. I think Elijah Cansey could be a one-on-one winner in the middle. I think that Vita Vea could be a one-on-one winner, but they're just not. And all due respect to the Falcons, because especially Kirk Cousins, once again, just able to absolutely carve them up through 6 quarters. Okay, he didn't really have to do it too much in the second half of this game, but through the 4 quarters and the 1 drive in overtime in Week 5, and then the first 2 quarters in this game, Kirk Cousins threw for 7 touchdowns, just 1 interception, and over 700 passing yards, 733 passing yards. I mean, this is a guy who just very clearly knows how to attack your defense in basically every way. The anticipation was beautiful. Where his eyes were going was fantastic. He did not feel much pressure all game long, and because of that, you saw the Falcons end up winning this football game.
For sure.
So, most impressive for you. What do you got?
Boy, Jesse Bates is just a big play magnet, isn't he? An early forced fumble that leads to a Falcons touchdown. He's just unreal. I mean, you talk about a guy who's clearly one of the best safeties in football, and I could probably do this a lot of weeks with him, but a 90.9 overall grade. The forced fumble early that led to the Falcons' first touchdown. The interception in the third quarter, that was just incredible. Honestly, on a play, on a route that he was beat on and caught up to it, the recovery speed was amazing. The catch on the interception was incredible. Had 3 defensive stops as well. Jesse Bates, just an impact player every single week, and had a superb game in this one.
I'm going with Cade Otton, just because didn't see it coming. Going to be honest with you, Cade.
Somebody had to step up.
Didn't know you had that in you. 10 targets, 9 receptions, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was funny. We were watching this game, and I was playing against Kyle Pitts in fantasy, and even though, the Florida Gator and me love to see Kyle Pitts, actually doing something out there, it's very frustrating when Kyle Pitts, the one game that he goes off, you're playing against him in fantasy. But I negated it a little bit because I started Cade Otton in this one, so I could be happy for both guys now. And what a great day by Otton, because like you said, somebody had to step up in this one. No Chris Godwin, no Mike Evans. They had to be able to do something in the passing game. I think they abandoned the run game a little bit earlier than they needed to, certainly in the second half. It felt like Bucky Irving was running the ball really, really well in the first half. And it felt like certainly the way that the Bucs kind of want to stay very multiple with their running backs, I think it's always good in theory, but like Bucky Irving's getting carries, Rachaad White's getting carries, Sean Tucker's getting carries now. In my opinion, Bucky's the best back. You got to give Bucky the lion's share of the carries.
He's been the most consistent one this year.
You basically have to let him be your RB1 until he has a string of inefficiencies where, okay, now I can open it up a little bit more and get Rachaad White more involved. I think you can get Rachaad White in the passing game consistently, but for as good of a game as Sean Tucker had the other week, when your running back rotation just starts to get really deep, I don't think you really allow any of these guys to get going. And it makes you think in your head, like, okay, I've got to go to this guy next. I got to keep this guy fresh. I got to put this guy in the rotation. I think they've got to be all in on Bucky Irving until he proves them that too much is too much, because he's been playing that well for them.
I'm always a fan, too, when you have multiple backs like that. Put them on the field at the same time. I think there's always more stuff you can do if you have multiple backs. If you put them both out there, I think two guys on the field like Irving and White at the same time, I think could be a real threat, especially when you talk about the passing game.